Welcome to the Sisters in Crime Writers Podcast. Everyone has a unique writing journey, so join us for conversations about those journeys from the writers themselves. This is Julie Henriquez, the Executive Director of Sisters in Crime, and I am delighted to welcome Karen A. Phillips to the podcast this week. Karen lives in Northern California and writes humorous, fun, action-packed mysteries. She has many short stories published in various anthologies. Her characters are engaging and fearless. The Rocky Nelson Boxing Mystery Series features an amateur sleuth who boxes. Karen is a past president of Capital Crimes, the Sacramento chapter of Sisters in Crime, and is a member of many other writing organizations. And yes, Karen does take boxing lessons. Karen, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Julie. I'm excited.
I'm excited to talk to you. So we will talk about boxing, but let's start where I always start. When did you say to yourself, I want to write a novel?
So I've always written, both as a child and as an adult. I did well in school in English classes with essays. And I read at one time in my adult life a mystery novel that I thought was kind of like so-so, like hum-hum. You know, it wasn't really that exciting. And I thought, well, I could at least do this good. So I started taking writing classes and I joined Sisters in Crime. And it took me a long time to learn the craft. And I started publishing short stories in various anthologies. And then to write my first novel in the Rocky Nelson Boxing series took me 5 years.
So I love this conversation because I think that it's an important one to have, that you can want to do this, but craft, it isn't easy to learn, even when you're a voracious reader and you know when things don't work, but to actually do it is tough.
Yes, I agree. It was like pulling teeth to get myself to sit in the chair and write, and I would use every excuse to get out of the chair and do something else. But once I really got into the story, it really felt good. And I was applying the tools that I had learned, and then I would go back and revise. And I've always used critique groups and beta readers, and I keep taking more and more classes. I know there's always room to develop the craft and improve.
So you also mentioned that you've written short stories, and that's another way of figuring out craft. Although it's a different world, but also to get published. To sort of break into that through anthologies.
Oh, definitely. It was like taking baby steps in a way for me, and joining a chapter with Sisters in Crime and having the support and resources to write a short story and then submit it for an anthology, because really every chapter at one point does an anthology, and they encourage you to submit. And so I started that way, and it really builds your self-esteem, and then you just keep writing, and it's just I would highly recommend that for anyone who doesn't already belong to Sisters in Crime to join.
Yeah. Chapters. And also, when you set about writing these short stories, was it as much of a writing exercise for you as it was, okay, I'm going to learn craft? You know what I mean? Was it sort of like, all right, this novel is still daunting, so I'm going to write 3,000 words about this and submit and see if I'll get in the anthology?
Yes, and it does help that the anthology has a theme, and so you write to the theme. And yes, it's daunting and exciting at the same time. And so I said, let's just try this.
Yeah. So, talk to me about, you're taking craft lessons, you're figuring stuff out, you're immersing yourself. What made you come up with the hook for your book that you thought this is enough for a book? This isn't a short story. This is enough for an entire book.
Yes. So I went to my first trailer fest. It's a vintage trailer fest where they have all these old trailers like Airstreams and canned hams. They have the funniest names for these old trailers. And the people who own them put them on display for the public. So you can go around and walk inside and see all the restoration they've done and talk to the owners. And a lot of them dress in costumes that are period correct for when their trailer was built.
Wow.
And I just had so much fun. And I thought, what a great place to find a dead body. So I wanted to write a cozy mystery, but to be honest, I read all kinds of different types of mysteries. And so I tried to make it a cozy, but it kind of veered into traditional. And yet I still wanted to start with an amateur sleuth in a small town setting. And I just thought this is going to make a great novel and potentially a series.
And so tell me a little bit more when you're building this, when a cozy series or any series, you're building a world.
Right.
So this was a sort of a world to immerse, but where characters, it's sort of, I call it the gravitational pull of the world, the characters, the setting, the this, the that, and, of course, dead bodies are helpful as well. But talk to me about what else came together for you that you thought, okay, this is going to be good.
Well, a lot of people say, write what you know, and some people go the opposite direction. Well, I decided it would be easiest to write a character that's kind of like me and write a setting that's kind of like where I live. And so that's what I did. And one thing that was different, very different. Well, for one thing, the amateur sleuth is much braver than me. And I decided, I'll throw this in. I decided to have her take boxing lessons like I do, to make her different from someone who owns a tea shop or a bakery. And so I thought that this would be the best way to write the story, that it would be the easiest approach. Although, writing is nowhere near easy. And so I even threw my dad in there. So he's my protagonist's dad, and he provides a lot of humor because in the books he's 78 years old and he wants to be her sidekick. And he says a lot of stuff my dad says, which he's pretty funny when he wants to be. So really, it's a lot like my life. And she's older. She's a 55, 56-year-old single woman. And at first I thought, gosh, this is going to make a great series. But I was always a little concerned about the boxing angle of it, because that's not super cute and cozy, like a bakery or a tea shop. But I do have a dog in the first book, and then I have cats in the books 2 and 3. And, the violence happens off the page, although there are a couple scenes where she throws a punch or somebody else throws a punch and there's a little bit of blood. There's no gratuitous sex. I follow all the cozy tropes.
Well, Karen, I think that this is an interesting conversation because I feel like the rules for cozies are a little bit more fluid, and they're kind of moving with things in that, there's always going to be justice. There's never going to be, violence on the page. It's likely never going to be sex on the page. It certainly can be inferred, but it's not going to be there. But, people are writing a little bit darker or a little edgier, or the language may not be as, it's that fine line between traditional and cozy. Do you find that that's true as you're reading and writing?
I really do. I mean, I know there's, a strong, hardcore, cozy segment of readers, and they get offended if you even say any 4-letter swear word.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And then there are those people like me who are very open to bending the rules And I was at Left Coast Crime recently, and there was talk of a new genre category called Cozy Plus, which is supposed to encapsulate these other types of cozies that don't fall into that strict cozy niche.
I think that that's kind of exciting, to sort of broaden it and maybe bring in other readers who may not want to read a cozy, but they actually do want to read something with all of those elements.
Right, I agree. And I think the publishing world is always trying to find a good category for those kind of cozies, because there's always been this debate, what makes a book a cozy versus a traditional mystery? And a lot of them fall somewhere in between or blend the two. And so the debate is never really answered. It's all there. People are always trying to find, where to stick these books. Like there's a certain shelf they have to put them on in a bookstore or a library. And so I think it's just an ever evolving, ongoing discussion.
I do too. And I also, bookstores aren't used to give shelves and shelves to just cozies, and they're not doing that anymore as much. Some do, but, so I think that there's a mixing up of the genre to begin with. So let's let the reader also get mixed up. All this to say, I think boxing's an excellent hook.
Oh, thank you. Pardon the pun, right?
Yeah, and it's fun. I mean, it's interesting. You have lots of interesting characters who can be part of that world, and be tons of opportunities for ne'er-do-wells to become involved with everything. And it's and plus it is an excellent workout and a fun activity.
Right.
Yeah.
I think more people should try it if they're nervous about, the idea. They should at least try and see how it feels. You don't have to punch somebody in the face. In fact, I rarely do. You just hit targets.
Yeah.
And my boxing coach used to try to get me to spar with other clients of his, and I just have a really hard time hitting somebody in the face.
Well, as would I, but I have taken boxing workouts, and it's incredibly good for stress.
Oh, believe me. Yes. I come out of those lessons, calm.
Like all of a sudden the world is a better place because.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And the other part about cozies that I think is such a hook for folks is that it's a community with characters they care about. They care about the mystery, but they also care about revisiting people over and over. As you said, it took 5 years, and that's not atypical to get that first book ready to go out into the world. But, part of it is building up that community, building up those sidekicks and figuring out what they can do and everything else. Was that challenging for you, or was that part of the fun?
It was both. And one of the most challenging aspects was I have Rocky, my amateur sleuth, whose real name is Raquel, but her father nicknamed her Rocky because he taught her how to box when she was young. I gave her a fraternal twin sister, and I had an original idea of where that was going to go and why, but it didn't really pan out because it was just too dark, actually. Okay, I'll be honest. So my original idea was that they had two different fathers, that their mother had sex very close together with these two different men,
Wow.
and that's how they became these two sisters that don't look anything alike, which is very possible. It's biologically possible. But
Wow.
for me to go back and explain that backstory in the series was just, I didn't want to do it, but I kept them as fraternal twin sisters. And so writing a sister who's different than Rocky, she's blonde, curvaceous like the mother, where Rocky's more athletic and has brown hair like the father. So I needed that contrast so that there was always tension in every story. And yet again, I didn't have a fraternal twin sisters. In fact, I have no sisters, I have brothers. And as I worked through that relationship, in the beginning, it was pretty I shouldn't say rocky, but questionable. And my critique partners, gave me feedback that I needed to work on this. And I decided to channel my relationship with my brothers, which is a love-hate relationship. And so it worked out really well.
Yeah. And we all pull stuff in from our lives and then amp them up, and hopefully don't trip over dead bodies on a regular basis. But the rest is all fuel. You talked about learning craft, and this is something that, as you mentioned, you do forever. I mean, I've gone to craft classes and sat next to like multi-award-winning authors who are taking notes and listening, because there's always something to learn and to figure out. What did you struggle with at the beginning, or what aha did you have on working on your second book? Because every book is also better than the next, which is a hard thing to learn as well.
Right. My main Achilles heel, if you will, is I keep it all in my head and I don't write it on the page. And I learned a new word at the conference, interiority. You need to express the interiority of your character. And I use a developmental editor, and she's always reminding me of this. Why is Rocky doing this? I don't understand. You need to tell the reader why she decided to do this. So that's my main challenge. And the other one is subplots. Like in the second book, I threw a lot of subplots in there, and I'm proud of it. It worked out really well. In fact, I used Jane Cleland's Mastering the Plot diagram. Yeah. She has the roads, and how they diverge at certain points. The subplots are the different roads. And that was very helpful. So just making the story deeper, taking it deeper, making it more complex without getting too complex, without throwing too many characters in, and letting the reader know what Rocky's thinking, because mine are first person point of view. So I'm always in Rocky's head, but often it's only in my head.
Well, and that's such an important thing to talk about, because in your brain, story's written, the characters all make sense, the plot is perfect and everything else. It's getting it from there onto the page and not skipping the part to catch the reader up to what Rocky's thinking. It's hard to remember, they're not here with me. They don't understand that she hates watermelon because this kid in first grade smushed her face into the watermelon at her birthday, and, all that backstory. And you don't want to give it all, but if she hates watermelon, you do have to mention somewhere why.
Yeah, and it's a fine line between telling the reader too much and not telling them enough.
Yeah. And using it to create richness with the characters. Yes. So it's not distracting.
Right. And sprinkling in that backstory without, hitting the reader over the head or boring them with exposition.
Starting the book in the right place so that you're not immersed in backstory. It's like, I'm actually going to lose those first 5 chapters and start here, because that's when the story starts, and trusting yourself.
Right.
Yeah. And subplots are interesting. And Jane Cleland's book is a great one, because they all have to serve the master story, but they also have to be subplots unto their own, they have to be their own stories, but they also do need to weave in. You can't just tell the story with nothing that has anything to do with the main story.
Exactly. Oh, and the other challenge is the sensory detail. So I try to include that as much as possible. I've read so many great stories, but they don't have enough sensory detail. You need to use all 5 senses, and there's so many that people leave out. They might have sight, which is easy enough, and sound, but they don't always have taste and smell and touch.
And that makes even adding another sensory detail to a scene, can just bring it up a notch. It can really enliven it.
Right.
Now, do you Well, let's talk about how you write. Do you come up with a topic that you think, okay, this is going to be the book? Do you plot arcs on on 3 books are going to tell this story and the next 3 will tell this story? Tell me about how you write.
So I'm a plantser, and I start out with an outline. I usually know the beginning and the end. And then I do have a whiteboard where I use the 3-act structure, and I put a bunch of Post-it notes on it, rising tension and then a bit of rest in between. And I use that as my framework, but then as I flesh out the story, I let it take me where it needs to go. So I'm kind of a mix, and I've heard that from a lot of people, and I think that's just a natural, organic way that people write. They have an idea, and then they just, as they flesh it out and layer things in, it might change.
So do you have tent poles that you're writing towards? So it's like, I know these 3 things are going to happen, and then I'm just going to write towards those 3 things?
Yes. But sometimes I have to step back and again, like refer to a diagram, say, Jane Cleland's, and see if things are heading in the right direction, and if I need to change a scene or rearrange scenes.
Do you write with Word or with Scrivener?
I use Scrivener. I love Scrivener. And sometimes if I'm stuck, I'll go for a walk or do something rote so that my mind, even a boxing lesson is great. It frees up the mind. And I also write freehand sometimes on a piece of paper, and that just somehow cements the idea and allows me to express myself better. And then I type it in.
I think one of the things that people underestimate in cozies is the fact that there's character growth, and there has to be. I mean, characters change. Now, your time compression, you might write 5 books and it's 6 weeks in book time, but she's going to change from book to book. Do you have a sense of an arc that you want her to be?
Yes. So every book, she has an arc, but the overreaching arc throughout the 3 books, and it's ending up to be a trilogy. If I write more in the series, that would be down the road, but I'm going to start a new series. She starts out that she found her mother after her mother had committed suicide. When Rocky was 10 years old, she found her mom. So she's always had this PTSD that she's been working through. And I know that might sound to the listeners like it's sad that her mom committed suicide, and that's not very cozy, but I handle it in such a way that she's an inspiration for Rocky. So it's really not a real depressing part of the story or the trilogy. But throughout every book, she's always trying to work through her feelings, her guilty feelings, those emotions that she carries with her since she found her when she was 10 years old. And there's an arc in the 3rd book where she's opening herself up to possibilities because it involves, of all things, Bigfoot. And so that's part of the theme of the book, is opening your mind to possibilities. And that helps her in the end of the book wrap up like her romantic interests. And she chooses to be with one of these 2 men that have been main characters throughout the trilogy.
So I love that. And themes, there could be series themes to book themes, and then just creating a cap for readers so that they're going to be satisfied. I mean, people always want more, but they'll be satisfied with her journey because it will have been, at least this phase of her life will have been completed.
Yes. And my books, because I really enjoy humorous people and laughing, I have humor in my stories and happy endings.
Is humor hard to write?
Oh, if I'm laughing when I'm writing it, I think it's hilarious. So that part's easy. But whether the other person who's reading it laughs, I wish I could, somehow be a fly on the wall while they're reading to see if they're laughing. But people have said they find them humorous and they're funny. And yet it is a challenge. I'm not the funniest person in the room by any means. My brothers were funny. My uncle was funny. some people in my family are natural born storytellers. But I have to work at it. And I've met some people, some writers that have taken stand-up comedy classes. And I think I'm going to try that because there are techniques that you can learn that help you write humor.
That's brilliant. There's so many things in the performing world that translate well to writing because you're in performance. You're learning how to give the audience all this information, whether you have it or not. You've got backstory and everything else, or how to deliver language. And writers have to do the same thing. It's just in a different medium.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So you're going to be a boxing comedian, Karen? Is that what you're telling me?
Oh my gosh, that's funny. I had not considered that. That could be a good angle.
It could be a great angle. That could be your shtick. You could go on stage with your boxing gloves.
Oh, that's funny.
So you talked about starting a new series. Talk to me about that experience, having written a series this second time. Are there things that you're like, oh, I rushed this here, or I wish I hadn't done that there, and now that you're building a new world and new characters, you can understand better what will serve a series?
That's a great question. It's that I don't know how to answer that. Let me pause.
Well, I mean, one example that people give when I talk to them about this is, when you're writing your first series and, you might have 3 books, and you might rush a romance and say, I wish that I'd spread that out. We just did a reading like a writer for Sisters in Crime. We did Elizabeth Peters' Crocodile in the Sandbank, which is her first in a very successful 20-book series. But she wrote it as a standalone. So when you read it, you think, I bet she wouldn't have had Amelia pregnant at the end of that first book, because that could have been paced out over 4 or 5 books, or maybe she would have made herself younger, or they're just things that when you're setting up a series, after you've done it once, you think, oh, I need to add this, or I need to not have this character in here, or I need to have more tension here, or whatever.
I see so I understand a lot of authors, when they wrote their first book, they wrote it as a standalone, and then they got a 2 or 3 book deal. Yeah. My going into this series was always it was going to be a series. So I didn't rush anything. I think I plotted it out pretty well over the course of 3 books. And going into this new series, I already wrote a short story a while back, and author Penny Warner read it, and she thought it was great. And she said, you should make a series with this. But I went in another direction. So now I'm coming back to this idea, and the short story, I think it's pretty well set up that it will be a good start, like a reader magnet for the series. And it's a divorced mother and her teenage daughter, but they're still in touch with the father. He's very much present in their lives. And he's a policeman or a detective. And the divorced mother is a private eye. And the daughter wants to get involved. So it's going to be a fun series.
Yeah. And are you imagining this will be cozy plus, traditional?
Cozy plus, yeah. I think it's going to be cozy plus, because I really I haven't tried writing suspense or thriller or anything like that. So I keep the violence minimal or off the page. So, and I don't like to use a lot of swearing. So it'll probably be cozy plus. I want, younger readers to be able to read this series.
Yeah. Oh.
Although they probably want violence and swearing.
I was going to say, some YA books are, whoa, look at that. A little dark. So what would you tell yourself at the beginning of this journey? What do you wish you'd known when you first started? Because writing and publishing are 2 different journeys. So let's talk about writing first. What do you wish you said to yourself?
I wish I would have started a lot earlier and just do it, discipline yourself to write every day or 5 days a week, whatever, even if it's for 15 minutes, even if it's just for 5 minutes, and just start earlier and definitely get involved with a writing group to have that support, because everybody knows writing is a solitary endeavor, but you need that constant affirmation and support and motivation. Yeah.
And when you say you wish you'd started earlier, what do you think was in your way?
Ooh, you are asking great questions.
Sorry.
Well, so because my career was graphic design, that was mostly my pursuit and occupied a lot of my time. And I just didn't think of writing as a career or even a hobby during those years. So once I got into college, it was all about graphic design and then getting a job and just supporting myself.
And also graphic design is creative as well. And when you do creative things, that can use up the energy you might have.
Right. And a lot of it is spent on the computer. So I don't want to sit at the computer anymore and write. So, one of the reasons why I joined Sisters in Crime was to network to get book cover design clients. And that's really also paralleling with my interest in writing fiction. So, I joined for both of those reasons, and it worked out really well. I got to know a lot of people by doing their book covers, and then they supported me as I pursued my writing career.
And do you do your own covers?
I do.
They're wonderful. I mean, graphic design is something that is very difficult to do well. There are programs out there. Nobody should use AI for graphic design. I just want to say that a lot, because it's stealing from other designers, and that's how that happens. But
I agree.
It's about balance and choices and colors and fonts and things that seem simple, but they're not. So getting a good book cover is a gift to an indie author as well.
Right. I agree. Thank you. And what amazes me at the same time is that there are a lot of good books out there with bad covers, and somehow they are found and recognized as a good story, despite their cover.
Despite their covers. Well, it's all part of the same. It's just, there's a lot going on with what would make a reader buy a book. And again, it's changed a little bit, but I can remember years ago sitting in Barnes and Noble when they had walls of cozies. And, on the first Tuesday of the month, it was like a field trip. I would watch people come in with their baskets, pick up a cover, look at it, and either put it back or turn it over. And if they put it back, it was gone. If they turned it over and then put it back, but if the two things work for them, they like the cover and they like the jacket copy, they'd throw it in their basket and, walk out with 10 books. I mean, it's remarkably important to have good covers.
Right. Because other than that, you're relying on word of mouth.
Right. Right. And even word of mouth, when people are going to look it up, they need to be involved. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Do you still write short stories?
I am going to write a short story for the LA chapter because they have an anthology. And then I'm going to ShortCon. I've never been. It's a one-day conference in Alexandria, Virginia. I think in June. I can't remember. So, that'll be fun.
And so do you enjoy writing? Do you enjoy one more than the other?
I think I like novel writing better because you have a lot more words to figure out, to stretch the story and flesh it out. And I think short story writing is a lot harder. And I haven't actually written a short story in a while, so I really need to revisit those tools in my toolbox, and hopefully I can make it work.
Yes. I've said this 100 times on this podcast, but it just because you can do one doesn't mean you can do the other. They are two completely different skill sets and worth trying to hone them both. But short stories are very hard to write, and so short. So let's talk about the publishing world. What were your expectations about publishing, and then, what have you learned?
So I initially wanted to pursue traditional publishing with my series, but my dad, as I mentioned earlier, is a character in the book, and at the time he was 87 years old, and I wanted to make sure that he had the book in his hands, published, and so he could read it before he wasn't able to read. So I decided, I did approach one publisher. They were interested, but again, it was going to take too long. And so I said, I'm just going to self-publish because I've helped enough people with their publishing journey as a cover artist that I knew what to do. And then I could format my book and upload it to, the various platforms. So I just decided to do that, and it cut the whole process made it a lot shorter.
You mentioned before that you're developmental editors and using other folks. That's when you're an indie published author, you are your own publishing company, so that you you don't have to hire a cover artist, but most people have to hire a cover artist. But also having editors at every stage of the journey to help make sure that it's the very best book that can get out there is so important. And developmental editors are a treasure to an author, because they'll tell you if the book is a book or if it's working. How have you found that part of it, like working with the developmental editor? What do you love about that? Or what do you hate?
Oh, I feel really fortunate with the developmental editor that I use. And I wouldn't be able to do it without her. I feel anybody who is independently publishing, it's crucial they use professional editors and not just a critique group and then say, oh, okay, I think my book's ready and self-publish. So I use a developmental editor and a proofreader. And my developmental editor is, again, like I mentioned earlier, always reminding me to explain to the reader why Rocky is deciding to do this, that, or the other.
Mm-hmm.
She also reminds me to reference boxing throughout the story. Sometimes I forget about that. And just, she has so many great suggestions, and she's a cheerleader. So, I don't know how I could have done it without her.
And she likely also tracks all three books, so that when you're writing a third book, if if Joe becomes Jenny, and unless there's a reason for that, they'll know the world enough that they can also say this wasn't how this happened before, and you got to remember what you did before and remember who that person is, which is hard as a writer because it's taking you 3 years to write all these books, and so but a reader will read them all in a week and will let you know every single mistake.
Oh yes, that's true. And I would say, maybe with this next series, I might pursue traditional publishing, only because it would be nice to have that expense on them in terms of editing costs and things like that. But, we'll see, because they're not going to market the book. I have to do that for myself. So there's there's pros and cons.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's part of the decisions, right? It's a business decision, but how great is it that we're living in a time when there are those opportunities for folks? Because when it was only traditionally published books were getting out there were gatekeepers, and that's not true anymore.
Right.
Yeah. You've talked about Sisters in Crime and what community means to you. Was that unexpected? Because I'd imagine as a graphic designer, although you have client meetings and things like that, you're doing focused work on your own. So you're probably used to that creative, focus. But was it unexpected how helpful a writing community can be?
Yes, because some people who don't know, maybe they're not involved in a writing organization, they assume that writers are competing against each other. and that they're not nice to each other. And so there's a murder at the writers' conference. But no, just kidding. But it's so opposite, and I was pleasantly surprised.
Yeah. Yeah. And things like Left Coast Crime, which as we're recording this was last weekend in San Francisco. And it's a wonderful, Karen and I saw each other there. It's a wonderful way to meet other writers, but to also meet readers and to just come back exhausted, but also with an energy, with a new spark.
Right. I 100% agree.
And way too many more books to read.
That's the one drawback. But, eventually you'll read them, so it's all good.
Or, just have them as piles around the house. And as people come over for dinner, it's like, here's your party favor.
I know every horizontal surface in my house has a stack of books.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I also have found going to conferences, I now will write them down on an app and maybe, like just put them on a wish list on my Kindle or something so that I can keep track of what I want to read. But I'm also not having to buy a separate piece of luggage to go home.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So you're going to be working working on this new series. Still any other ideas in the offing or is this where you are right now? You're going to, do you think that this new series is going to be 3 books? Might it be longer?
Yeah, this is where I am right now. The short story coming up for LA chapter and my new series, which I'm thinking of it as 3 books. I'll probably want to move on to something else after that. But, we'll see how successful it is and what other ideas pop in my head.
Yeah. Well, that's great. I mean, and it's, you're keeping lots of irons in the fire and working on things. So I want to, I look forward to hearing about the boxing comedian in the in the future. But thank you so much for a great conversation, Karen.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you for being with us today. Sisters in Crime is about community. We were founded to advocate for women crime writers, and we continue that mission by fighting for equity in the crime writing community. Sisters in Crime is an international, inclusive organization for all who write and love crime fiction, mystery, thrillers, and suspense. Join us at sistersandcrime.org and make sure you subscribe to this podcast.